All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. It's Price and I. Brad is out on travel yet again. So the dynamic duo. We have an announcement. This thing, podcast, pseudo podcast, not a podcast. It has a name. The Information Exchange. Thank you everyone who submitted. Prize money will be going out shortly. But
Prize money.
as we exchange some information here, what information should we start with, Bryce?
Well, the first thing I want to tell you is that it is 83 degrees today in San Antonio. So we are back.
Don't flex on the.
I'm
There are
ready.
poor people in New York or whatever that are
I'm
freezing their
sorry to
bums
everyone
off.
else. They probably think I'm sad that I live in Texas, and sometimes it is. But today it's Friday. I've got allergies because of it, but I'm thrilled and I'm excited for summer. But you know what I am thinking about is a much colder place, a place where they just released their own ambient scribe, but don't call it a scribe, according to Dr. Gerhardt, is Epic's release of art. And what is it? I mean, it's released. Is anyone using it already, or was it just a press release?
No, they said they're piloting it. I think with like
Okay.
the usual like crew
Oh,
in
right.
the
Oh, right.
Madison area.
Group Health Cooperative. Thank you for delivering my first baby. Yeah, so that one's really exciting for me. Brendan turned me onto a podcast from Ben Thompson and John Gruber called Dithering. It's like 15-minute episodes, and I've learned a ton about like FANG companies and their distribution and things like that. And this, to me, this release of an ambient scribe from the company that everyone thinks has the walled garden and all of the healthcare data, and you know, they're always getting slapped for antitrust, or people are accusing them of antitrust and monopoly, and people are accusing them of info blocking, and now they have their own ambient scribe, and it begs the question, do all other ambient scribes wither away? I think the answer is obviously not, but Epic does have distribution. So apart from functionality and integration and things like that, I've been thinking Epic has an MSA with every organization that they're going to try to sell this scribe to. Epic has potentially the ability to make it a cheaper implementation because their system is already the source of record at these organizations. And does that give them tailwinds? Yes. At the same time, everyone I know has an iPhone in their pocket, and Apple Maps is way worse than Google Maps. So I am thinking with the evolution of info blocking policy and with the evolution of the market, we're going to see independent vendors be able to come in and outperform incumbents on their own platforms. I don't know when it's going to happen, and I haven't seen anything from Abridge or Ambiance or Art. They're all named with A's, I guess. But I'm really excited to think about like what is going to differentiate these things? What are providers going to be saying in 5 years? Right now, it's easy to listen to all the chitter chatter and have your own opinion. Yeah, I'm curious. How do you think this one's going to evolve over time?
Yeah, I mean, I see optimism. If you're a vendor, you're not psyched because your goal is to operate in a space that nobody else is operating in. That's the ideal. But guess what? That's not real for real problems. Like you're very, very lucky if you're the only person operating a space. You've either won the market or just maybe it's a small enough piece of the pie, but big enough for you. Typically not for venture capital in that case. And so good problems have many solutions, and art is another one. And so from a vendor perspective, yeah, you as a bridge or Microsoft Dragon or whomever, you'd hope that Epic doesn't enter, but every EHR is entering. Every EHR except for Meditech, more or less, is making their own scribe. So competition should be assumed. The system of record will always gravitate towards the point solutions that have meaty problems, right? And what's so interesting and valuable to remember is that information blocking means that there are many levers they can use. You alluded to some of them to differentiate, but the technologies that they surface, the things that they're doing with their own scribe, they better make that available and not preclude on a technical level competition from doing those functionalities, or they're going to be at a risk of information block if they block information flows that are available through their own technologies. That's where they're going to start to see tensions. That's from the information blocking front. The other is at one you mentioned of pricing. Well, yeah, like one positive outcome is more competition means lower prices. And so if more competition leads to lower prices for providers, that's great. That's a positive thing. We should remember that. It's not positive for vendors that like to charge a lot, but it's positive for the providers with more choice, lower cost, more innovation pressure. That's the positive of competition. Epic behaving anti competitively, one manifestation potentially would be pricing competition out of existence. They
Hmm.
would be colossally stupid to do so right now.
With yeah, because that's specifically what the state of Texas is calling out as one of their accusations in their lawsuit against
Right. So where
Epic. Yeah.
where is the bar, right? Because we know their pricing. It's not per seat or whatever, like many of these scribes. It's this sort of like bucketed license of AI functionality that you add on to your base Epic package, right? That's what Stat reported. So when does it become predatory pricing or whatever? Is this philosophical debate that people will say, well, it's lower than it used to be, so it's predatory. It's driving us out of business. I, as a capitalist, a left wing capitalist, but a capitalist, will always argue for the open market and competitions to lead to lower prices for consumers and buyers. And so, and some social goods. And so, at face value, it was inevitable this happened. I said in August, they're going to make it. They'd be dumb not to cede this ground of the user interface and to at least not make a play there. And so, the net result should be better for providers. And I agree with you, it doesn't kill these other scribes, these third party scribes. They just have to go keep doing the next thing.
Healthcare is unique in that our industry has the info blocking laws. How does this work? What I'm just curious if this is a little bit different than like uh obviously Meta and Google and Microsoft are competitive with each other, but they all release software on each other's platforms. Yeah, I'm curious, like, do they have more levers to block each other, or are they equally scrutinized by the FTC and things like that?
Well, they're certainly scrutinized. All of them have like active antitrust cases. We tend to commingle technology. Like, why isn't Epic like Facebook or something? And like consumer technologies are different than horizontal B2B technologies are different than vertical SaaS or software. And so,
Mm,
to your question, in the US, there's the antitrust stuff, but there's not many interoperability provisions. In Europe, there's the Digital Markets Act that specifically targets those gatekeepers, they call them, and say you must be interoperable with your platforms and not self-preference. The
mm.
Digital Markets Act, we could go and spend a full episode on. It's super interesting in the most like regulatory legal way of ultimate.
Wait, hold on, real quick. I just want to say, Brendan is telling you that this is super interesting, but when he went to copy and paste the link to this podcast for me to join, he accidentally copy and pasted some message about a court addressing the defendant's motion to stay on February 11th. So he's different than us. Brendan is reading about
the kids
court
say
cases.
the kids say built different. I'm built different.
Built.
So, but that was about QRIS. QRIS February 11th. We're going to get some decisions. So I'll buy that transcript and we'll find some juicy stuff out in Epic's in the case against Epic.
I'll let you read that transcript while I do something else. But I'm really glad you enjoy it. Um, another thing that I want to think about really quickly is just like the stickiness of systems of record. And this is something that the super long acquired podcast about Epic taught me a little bit of. And then again, Dithering was mentioning just this week with the sort of proliferation of AI and the fact that now all of a sudden it's like you can kind of build your own apps to do your own things in like an hour if you want. And is software dying and blah blah blah. And at the end of the episode that I was listening to, they were kind of like systems of record are the safest because that database and the ridiculous connections between all of the thousands of tables that it orchestrates is the most defensible against one-off applications and things like that. So yeah, I guess that just had me wondering, like, do you feel like Epic is uniquely like exposed to competition compared to other industries or systems of record, or do you feel like actually no, they're still going to have the best understanding of when and why doctors place orders and the best understanding of when and why billing needs to, you know, change in the middle of an episode and things like that.
It's a good question. It's not just Epic, it's all EHRs, right? All certified
Sorry,
health
yes, but we're talking
technology.
about art. We're talking about art,
Yeah,
the release
yeah,
of
yeah.
their ambient scribes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but in terms of information blocking, it affects all EHRs. And in terms of the forces of AI and disruption, lower end non-enterprise ones are going to be less resilient than the enterprise ones for the reasons you said
Mm,
from the podcast from Ben Thompson. It's the interconnectedness, all the systems and modalities and things that they've invested in, the larger price tags. The switching costs are just astronomically higher.
yeah.
Um, but that's not to say that that AI and other forces aren't going to challenge that. It's challengeable, but in the spectrum of types of software, it's one of the more resilient, on the more resilient side, especially the enterprise ones like Epic, from being truly disrupted versus like a point solution where you're kind of toast. Network-based businesses. There's a great post by Travis May of Datavan fame this week where he said, "Hey, actually, systems of record, well, they could be disrupted by AI, hypothetically. Networks can. To go build a network in a B2B fashion isn't you can throw infinite compute, infinite tokens at it, and it doesn't work. You have to use existing networks. You have to bootstrap on telephone or SMS or SureScripts or something, someone that's actually done the hard work of networks. And so his thesis, which is really good in a binary sense, is networks, there's zero disruption effect from AI. There's some the systems of record. So, we should be
Hmm.
building networks-based businesses. There's more nuance than that binary, but there's truth to it. It's a really good post that we'll put in the show notes. To your other half of your question about art, yeah, like even in a recalibrated industry like healthcare, where it's fairer than ever to third parties competing, there's amassed data and insights and customer base and distribution effects and single vendoritis, right? Like the single throat to choke that mean that there's still extreme advantages to being the system of record, the dominant vendor for a business. But at least we made it fairer. At least we didn't, at least in healthcare with information blocking, third parties aren't precluded and foreclosed from competing.
Hmm.
They can compete equally on a technical lens. And if they are prevented in some way, they can punch back. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is a really fair, interesting pro-competitive law. That means, hey, you have no excuse except to go and be better. How cool is that? I think that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. This is way over my head, but I I don't imagine like next month, AI will have changed all of us and our understanding of computers and software that much. But it is interesting thinking about 5 years from now. You know, I'm saying Epic has this great, or I should say, their moat in terms of what they've built so far is its 40 years of database work and system of record work. But the user interface is what AI is slowly going to render completely not useless, but like just change entirely, right? Like the idea that 5 years from now, a doctor actually might, you know, this is a doctor who's in Harvard Med School right now, right? And she's 22, and by the time she's a doctor and she's 30, she's going to be very comfortable just talking into space with whatever AI software she has. She doesn't really give a crap about the system of record. She might not even be looking at Epic. She might not even be thinking about Epic, at least like as much as doctors have been trained to in the last 30 or 40 years. And so, yeah, it is interesting to think like maybe we will end up seeing Epic selling their database systems like Texas claims that they do instead of their entire suite with their user interface. It'll be cool to see if people can make it that much easier to document care and get paid accurately and be compliant without sort of being stuck within the four walls of a hyperdrive window. So,
I mean, there's two threads I want to pull there. One is enterprise software has always been about generalization, right? Because if you're a single doc practice, you're essentially buying consumer software that's fit for purpose for you, as fit for purpose, but you have full agency to choose. As you get bigger and bigger organizations, you have the principal agent
principal
problem.
agent problem.
There we go. There we go. But you're generalizing. You're saying, okay, what's the workflows that work? Which system applies the business logic, the workflows that work in a generalized sense across my populations, the people with constituent within that organization. And so inherently, you're disappointing people because the user interface that's been chosen is different than how they really want to do the workflow. And deterministic software encodes that workflow in such a way that um, I would like to go and type in this way, but I have to go dictate it or whatever. Like that's always been deterministic and a generalization in a way that not as painful to people, but everyone hates their enterprise software. You hate your, Trinet or HR management or Gusto or whatever. You hate your EHR. You hate your Procore. Like, no, very few people like their
Salesforce.
software.
You got to add Salesforce in
Salesforce,
there.
yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
Salesforce, HubSpot, like whatever. You're like, I don't want to put that in, and that's because it's not the workflow that you want. You want to do your job and achieve an outcome, but not be told the exact way to do it. But you have to do it that particular way because software is deterministic and rote. But one interesting thesis that I think is far more applicable than like every person's going to go build their own software now. Like I think that maybe a subset, a greater trend of people can build their own software. But the cool reality is that people will build the user interfaces in a less deterministic way, in a
Mm,
probabilistic way that allows you to do your thing, me to do my thing, and it still gets put into the system in a way that has data integrity and meets the needs and is documented appropriately. And
yeah.
so you can see that via scribes to a small degree of like, I can go and dictate and do my workflow and that I would want to with my patient. You can do it with yours. You probably do it in pretty different ways, but at the end of the day, it gets put into Epic or Cerner or
Yeah.
whatever in the right fields.
I mean, hell, a lot of these scribes are like, speak French, speak Spanish. We don't care. We'll make sure it gets to the right location with the right meaning. I feel like I'm just parroting off my friends over at Dithering who I've never met, but one of them made the point specifically like that with the proliferation of AI and everyone wants to build their own software, they were like, oh, think about all this software that everyone hates, the enterprise software that everyone hates. This is going to be bad for them. And the counterpoint was like, no, those everyone hates those softwares, and they're still in existence because they're so sticky. The systems of record, the Salesforce, the Epic, whatever it is. And so, yes, how you interact with them might become a lot smoother and more customizable over the next decade, and particularly interesting in healthcare with info blocking legislation. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kind of moat sticks around.
I think the other big one that they hint at either one of those podcasts, but is just on top of mind for me is AI for software producers like HTD, like the vendors we help, is moving towards marginal cost, right? The cost of production of software is going from a very premium good to a marginal cost good. And in that world, all of a sudden, I can produce all the software I want as a software shop. And that means that everyone is suddenly decoupled from the prioritization that they had to do pretty rigidly. Like Epic had to be like, I'm never going to build a PAX. I'm never going to build the ERP. I'm never going to build whatever. Well, now with marginal costs of software production, or at least rapidly decreasing, you can go in a lot of different directions all at once. And so if you want to own the whole enterprise within a vertical, all of a sudden maybe you can. And so the competitive boundaries that existed before are eroding at a time where it's easier than ever to build a third party and connect to EHRs and system of record. It's becoming easier for systems of record to do the whole damn thing. And so that means there's going to be increased tensions over the next coming years as more and more of these software vendors just say, I can serve the full needs of the enterprise. If that's true, then the tensions we see uh, that have always been there between point solutions and systems of record will be exacerbated immensely. And the fights, the information blocking driven fights, the antitrust fights, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just the beginning as tensions continue to rise. Like that is
Mm,
one catalyst for these fights that is just getting started. And it's not just going to be in healthcare. We'll see it across so many other industries. We see Salesforce starting to monetize and shut down access to Slack and Salesforce that were historically open platforms, and that they're not the only ones. And that's because the data hungriness, the context hungriness of AI, in addition to the ability to produce a lot of software, means that the competitive boundaries are eroding and the competitive heat is turning up to 11.
mm, mm. I don't like a dog eat dog world, but hopefully I'll find a place to add value because I've got 3 kids to feed.
Well, it's the matrix. We're all just going to be,
Yeah.
energy sources. It's because the data
Great.
centers need
Good. Yeah.
energy.
that makes me feel better too. Um, Hopefully my children have a really good dream in their little pod while they're, getting juiced for whatever. Well, speaking of info blocking regulation and the government, we had some action come out of the government over the past week or two. We've got USCDI V7 proposed, not finalized, but proposed, which you think was particularly meaty. I've got a special place in my heart amongst the new resources included in USCDI V7, which is the United States Core Data Set for Interoperability, referred to from many different policies and regulations saying like EHRs need to make all of this data available via API, and this data is getting defined as broader and broader over time. When would V7 even be like released into the, when would it be enforced? We're talking years from now still, right?
Well, so the cycle, the annual cycle means that they'll receive comments, they'll finalize it this summer, and then the U.S. core team, so the Argonaut team within HL7, they'll go and they'll say, okay, these USCDI is a description of types of data, so it can be
Yeah.
agnostic. If we were to say, actually, fire, we're done
Oh,
with that.
right.
We're on to the
It's not
next thing.
resources. It's not resources. It's concepts, data concept, which is what resources are, but it's not one to one with fire.
That's right, and that
Got it.
way it could apply to CDA today because it's referenced in multiple data formats, and so the core team has to go and be like, all right, let's go and map this out and come to a consensus on how we will use this across EHRs and across systems. So we'll do that by end of the year or whatever, and then it's just there for people to reference and use realistically right now. And that the reality is that USCDI has only had two regulatory pushes, right? USCDI V1 was pushed via the Cures Act. USCDI V3 was required via um, HTI1. And so
And
the
just
this
began
this
enforcement like 2026, January 1st.
it got pushed back because of the shutdown. So it's actually
Oh,
like end of February. So if you go
right.
looking, like some of the HRs like, no, I'm still working on it. But yeah, and it's like very convoluted, like everything. We're doing backflips, regulatory backflips. But HTI 6 is coming, we believe. We have indication. And my optimism is they'll go full bore because in um, version 7 of USCDI, they went for it. Like USCI versioning was the most frustrating thing in the world. They added like one data element here and like, ooh, like a nice new thing over here, but like very slow moving. There's so much data out there in terms of EHRs, and they were very iterative in terms of adding thing year over year. Not this year. Like they went for it. There's so many good things. What's your favorite?
Well, as a former Cadence implementer, I'm very endeared to appointments, and appointments are now a part of the USCDI V7. And I want to dig in on that for just a second. Not only are appointments included in USCDI V7, but in the separate but same world of the CMS aligned networks and the CMS health tech ecosystem, part of the commission of the CMS has been to say to EHRs and to PHRs, personal health records and individual access service apps, like you all need to be able to talk about encounters and appointments. And even EHRs need to proactively notify others about encounters and appointments. And it's hilarious to think about appointments as future encounters because encounters are sort of strictly meant to be like clinical concepts. It's like when something's actually happening between a physician and a patient or what have you. And then appointments are this beautiful, nebulous, philosophical idea. They don't even exist. They're just sticky notes that dream of a time when a provider might actually see the patient that they need to see. And to force certified electronic health records to make appointment information available programmatically is really exciting for me because so much of trying to capture the value or success in value-based care is like, well, you have to schedule things. You have to tell patients before their appointment that they should fast and get their labs done. Or, you have to understand, I don't need to call Brendan because he's supposed to go in next week and that will be his annual wellness visit. So appointments is the most exciting for me. I also thought there were a few that were like just statuses that I thought were kind of lame. I was like, how is this not in there before? Maybe it's not lame that they're added. It's lame that they weren't in there before. Like medication status wasn't in there before. So what? Were we just getting medications and we didn't know if they were active or expired?
The intent here, and you see the pieces across the board, like referrals, appointments, the status part. It's all about we're including not just the things that have been delivered, the things that are concrete, like the encounter that's happened, the medications that's prescribed or dispensed. That's where we've always focused USCDI and much data exchange. So much of what's the new in here is focused on what's ahead, the care plan in a very positive sense. And so the
Right.
statuses are a vehicle to say, this is a planned medication, um, is my read on it. I've said this since like USC CDI V2. I've been commenting every year and be like, where are appointments? Like, what's going on here? Because as part of understanding what needs to happen with a patient, you need to not only say, hey, what's happened to them, but like what's already been scheduled, what's ahead for them, so that I know that the problem that they have is being taken care of. Like that is part of the care plan in a way that's like, duh. But why is it not in there? Why are these things not in there? Well, we've always been in this kumbaya phase of data exchange when it comes to not within your enterprise, but cross enterprise. Like
Yeah.
I can ship over a CDA, a transfer of care,
I
because
know where you're
it's
going with this.
historic data. But as soon as I'm including planned appointments, planned medications, planned whatever, there's the chance to use that information to say, wait a minute, that's a value capture moment in the healthcare system. And I want to capture that value. And so we've been able to be in this kumbaya phase for so long because we largely said we're just transferring care, we're just taking care of the patient, but there's just gonna be this chance to look at planned encounters, planned medications, planned labs, whatever, and say that's a
Referral
known
notes.
point of spend that I can go and grab potentially. Is the nefarious way of viewing this if you're trying to be cynical. I'm not trying to be cynical, but just that is underpinning some of this, undoubtedly.
You mean the fact that it's just now coming out instead of having been okay? And what's the current administration's message by adding all of these things?
The ASTP is largely trying to serve the CMS's goals in many ways. Not only, but like when the CMS health tech ecosystem is driving towards something, they want to support it. And so
Yeah.
you can look at this and be like, appointments like that, that's such a clear through line there. The administration is hearing what market people are asking, and many vendors and things that are out there. Like this would be great to get out there because they want to take care of patients in a positive way, or that cynical view. They want to go capture value. And the administration by and large is like, we're going to go do things. We're not going to sit around thinking and waiting and overanalyzing. We're going to go ship and iterate and get stuff out there. And so I think Dr. Keen, I think Steve Posnack are like, let's go for it. Because we can think about this all day long, or we can go do it and then revisit down the line once
Mm.
we've put it out into the market. And I appreciate that view because I generally think, yes, there are the cynical views, the views of what the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that can happen with these things with data exchange, like we are having with payers and provider data exchange. But we've had this before. We've had this before with just plain treatment, treatment provider to provider exchange. And that was a huge barrier in the early 2010s. And we overcame it. And now it's nearly ubiquitous. And people are like, wow, how cool is that? Like it's great
Yeah.
that we can care for patients. And certainly there's been tensions on that from other angles, but the actual treatment exchange provider provider, is now taken for granted. And it was such a battleground when it was first getting started in the different health information networks.
You know what else I'm realizing is like if you are a healthcare provider, a business that provides healthcare, and you don't want another entity to have access to the appointments in your system of record, don't sign a business agreement with them. This is not forced scope in TEFCA yet. It's not, it's theoretically patients one day through the patient access endpoints should be able to access everything that's within USCDI. So it's nice that patients can see appointments that they have scheduled. But like, it's not immediately going to be like a bunch of piranhas you know, looking for Main Street Health's business that are going to query this data and start calling appointments and, snaking their patients out from underneath them. So totally agree with you. Like, let's get helpful information in the hands of builders and let them do things that hopefully make people healthier.
even if people are going to snake it, it's like the net good is far in excess. It's
Right.
like you gotta weigh things on both sides of the scale instead of just being like, how do we eliminate any risk or fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or any problems? You'll never eliminate it. It's always a trade-off situation, and you, the cadence implementer, know this. Like, there's a lot of good that can come out of seeing what's ahead for a patient. I think more tactically for business associates using these data sets, like they're requested all the time. People are like, how do I use Fire to get appointments? Because I'm building and I want to see the appointment as an enrollment trigger. You're
Hmm.
like, sorry, like go use HL7V2. And
Yeah.
so this alongside Fire subscriptions and right back, hey, wait, there's a future where a lot of business associates can live Fire only, which is not the case today, right? Like,
Yeah.
what would you say? 5% of apps can be Fire only, less?
Actually, I think we had a stat for this at Redox. Like of our customers, only 5% of them, maybe 5 to 10, were like not using a V2 feed or a VPN or some sort of other trigger mechanism. And something like 60 to 80%, I'm obviously not that good with numbers, but we're writing back as well. So like the idea that you could just have a RESTful API which gives you like 10 data points on a patient, and then you're like, okay, look, you can build on this data. It's like, no, Fire has been super useful. That's tiny column of it that they've given us, and now that it's becoming a broader swath of forced functionality, this is really fun. This is fun. Yeah. So we love USCDI V7, lucky number 7.
We love the Fire. We love the Fire.
I think about this stuff too much. Also, just to be clear, as a cadence implementer, I think the only thing I really learned was that my wife was never going to live in Wisconsin her whole life because it's way too cold, and she's from
Wait, you
Texas.
got to say
So
what we never said. What is cadence? What is cadence for the audience?
Epic has catchy little names for all of their applications, and Cadence is the scheduling and appointments application. Prelude is the registration application. So I thought about registering and scheduling patients in enterprise software systems before I really knew what an enterprise software system was. So shout out to my customers in North Carolina from when I worked at Epic. Thanks for being very patient with me when I was 21, and hopefully I can help you in the future. Um, okay, anything else you wanted to say on USCDI V7? Because I want you to teach me about one more thing that came from the government,
Let's dive in.
the diagnostic imaging RFI. Tell me all about it. I didn't read it, but I am like, imaging does a lot. Like if I was talking to Ellen Brown on her Substack a few weeks ago, and she uploaded all of her imaging to one of those LLMs that has a health bolt on now, and she learned a ton. So yeah, tell me what this diagnostic imaging RFI is looking to accomplish.
Yeah. So we have been hyper focused on discrete data exchange in America as a regulatory prerogative in the clinical world, but that's all in the EHR. But there's this other big system every hospital has, that most different clinics of different varieties have, which is the picture archive and communication system, the PACS system. And that, for radiology historically, but across all imaging specialties, is in that workflow. You schedule in Cadence, you show up for your appointment. The tech says, all right, let's do the CT, let's do the echocardiogram, let's do the MRI. So they take that image and it goes to the PACS system. It is very high fidelity, is sort of a format called DICOM. So from the machine, that DICOM file, it transits to the PACS system, is stored there, and then the radiologist or cardiologist, they do their interpretation. They can do their interpretation in the PACS-driven workflow, or in the electronic health record. So that's the diagnostic imaging workflow in a nutshell.
The TLDR there is like, this system was designed to really focus on massive images, tons of pixels. How much space is in between these two pixels? It's completely different concept than just patient telling me they have a tummy ache. And Epic doesn't offer oh no, they do.
No, not today,
No,
right?
okay. So
That's
we're talking
been
about a
it's
very,
something
very
that
different
most
system.
most EHRs have said by the time they start looking at it, they're like, all right, there's these well-developed vendors. It's a system of record in its own right. we're gonna have a truce between the two. And there's some like Oracle might have a nascent one, but like you have Agfa and Sectra and other vendors, GE Merge for cardiology that are pretty dominant and established. And it's like one of the older technologies purchased by health systems. So there's switching costs and they're used to it. And so those are all unregulated. They're not certified health
Yep.
IT, right? And so that means in terms of all the things we expect out of healthcare and how we can interact with healthcare, Wild West over there. And so,
The interpretation from the radiologist is oftentimes accessible or forced to be accessible, but the image itself is stuck in a cold, dark room.
yeah, totally right. The
Yeah.
diagnostic report, the interpretation, whether it's done in the PACS or the EHR, it gets back to the EHR, and then it's part of USCDI, and you get served up via diagnostic report and or document reference. So those have been accessible, but the image. Well, all right, you have a broken leg, you go to, Florida, you get hit by a bus. They're like, oh, shoot, we sort of want to see that old image to see where it was and things like that. And they go and try and pull over these networks. And guess what? They're like, I can see the report, but this guy, he didn't really write much up. I don't really know enough about it. I want to take a look at it.
Hmm.
No dice, no provider to provider exchange. There's private networks like Life Image and Umbra and things like that, but they're not ubiquitous and they're just not. It's not the same as these open operable networks. Likewise, you as a patient, you go onto my chart. You're like, let me see some stuff about my allergies or meds or whatever. You can, and you can also pull down your data. But if you want to see your images, a picture of that break, too bad, so sad. You got to go
Mm-hmm.
to the hospital, ask them. They're going to give you a CD
Mm-hmm.
you're like, where do I get a CD-ROM player this day and age? Go to the library or something? Like, I don't even know. All the kids are playing Fortnite next to you. You're looking at your leg. That is another aspect of this. This RFI is about we've ignored this space for so long. And Dr. Keen, I think, is a radiologist, or he cares a lot about imaging. So maybe it's
Yeah,
personal for him.
I think he's an interventional radiologist. Let's see.
Yeah, even the fun kind. Okay, he's getting in there. All this to say, we patients having access to their images, providers being able to exchange ubiquitously images between one another. That's all on the table, and they're looking for comment about the standards. The thing that's notable here is there are so many standards because we've DICOM, RS and WADI and the image study via FHIR. These are humongous files, and especially for certain specialties where it's not just an image. It's like they're taking 15, 20, 100 images all in rapid succession that are all
Mm-hmm.
super high fidelity. Well, how do you send that over the wire? How do you download that? Like those are real questions, but we've solved them like 6 times over. And guess what? Other countries like the Netherlands, they have ubiquitous image exchange in an interoperable fashion. And
Hmm.
so there's prior art for us to go and take a look at. So I think it's just been a lack of regulatory attention and also a weird functioning of our regulatory apparatus that the PAX is unregulated and thus not subject to many of the things we expect.
What's the RFI requesting? Like, just how should we do this?
For all these workflows, for patient access, for provider exchange, what are opinions on standards? It's just
Ooh.
the RFI is just like, tell us, because we've done that. They've taken cuts at this before lightly, but not in a heavy duty. Let's pull the market. Let's make it a priority. And so there's plenty of RFIs that go nowhere. But the optimism here is this is year one, I guess year two now. It's very early still in the administration. They could they
Oh
could
my
take a cut
gosh.
towards the end. This won't get into HCI 6, but they could take a cut at the end of the administration, potentially saying, okay, we're not going to do provider exchange, but maybe we do patient access because Josh Mendel, the brainiac that he is, has built this beautiful implementation guide for how we can use FHIR to access patient images. We should just do that. Like, hey, Dr.
Hmm.
Keen, Bosnack, just copy it. Just do patient access. We don't need to spoil the ocean. Like that one is such a slam dunk.
Patient access. Yeah, now I'm tempted to go find my most recent imaging study. I did break my foot in college. Maybe I could go back to UNC, get a CD. I want to see what happens if I put it in my Xbox. Are we gonna be able to open that bad boy? That'd be
That's
exciting.
interoperability right there.
Yeah, put it on my big screen TV in my basement in 2009 or something like that. That sounds great. All right, we're running out of time. Uh, we did have one more topic if you want to touch on that last one,
Yeah, sure. Let's
which
go for it.
was Veeva suing Epic. So add it to the list of court cases that Brendan has to follow. But this one is different in flavor. It's not about monopolies or, well, it is about competition. Veeva is saying that Epic's non-compete, the fact that if you work at Epic, you sign a non-compete that precludes you from working at a huge list of companies for the next 2 years or something after you leave Epic. Um, they're suing and saying what exactly?
Yeah. So context here, Viva is the epic of the like sort of like life sciences space. They worked with Salesforce back in the day. They built on Salesforce and sold a CRM for pharmaceutical companies, life sciences that, they could use the CRM to market the doctors. They expanded through that's called the commercial side of these businesses. They expanded and did document management and regulatory, and they leapfrogged over to what's called the clinical side, which is the clinical trials management software, the EDC, the electronic data capture software. So all these subsystems, and they're just a lot of ways they're like Epic. They're a big monolith in the sense that it's like you buy Viva across everything. And
Mm,
so it's a big integrated system and that is leading them to be the system of record in that space. And so it's just interesting from that vantage point of two systems of record going head to head. Whereas a lot of these other lawsuits are point solutions against Epic. This is two titans, really. Veeva is only getting better and better, and they're beyond that. They're different in many ways. They're a public benefit company. They're quite nice to their employees. Like there's a lot of differences from from Epic, but they decided to make a strategy of hiring ex-Epic people or just opening in Madison and being very open to Epic people coming over. This past December, a year, according to the alleged allegations, Epic put them on the non-compete because they're just tired of Viva offering better salary and better working conditions for in an interesting space. Uh,
mm,
from competing for the talent, and
mm-hmm,
so they added Viva to the non-compete. Non-compete, to your point, used to have so many companies. It had the YMCA, it had all these random small, like anyone, 5,000 companies or something. And they drew it back a couple years ago. God knows why, but I think they got pressured and they're like, all right, let's maybe with Lena Khan looking at non-competes, they're like, all right,
mm.
let's trim it down a bit.
Little haircut.
Yeah, a little haircut from 5,000 to like, 20 or 30. And they trimmed it down to like real competitors by and large,
Yeah, yeah,
because the list is in the complaint, which you can find on my Substack. But they added Viva,
yeah.
and guess what? It depends on the state and the way that their perspective on non-competes is very varied across states. But Wisconsin's actually pretty progressive here. They have a federal or not federal. They have a state law that says, like it must be truly, you must truly prove that the way you're shaping your non-compete is intended to protect your intellectual property and things like
Mm,
that. It's against, you're not just doing these blanket types of non-compete. And so the question really here is Viva competing with Epic? And at face value, you're like, no, they're not. That
yeah.
being said, Viva is starting to sell things into providers, different small software, and Epic is starting to sell things into clinical trials with their clinical trials management system. So there are
Mm,
competitive edges that I think Epic might point to if it progresses, or they'll have to, really, I think. And then the other piece that's interesting is this ripe? The issue is the legal term. Has actual harm occurred? And typically that's by you leave Epic, you try to go Viva, Epic says to you, no, you cannot, and you say, I've been hurt, I've been harmed in my ability to make a better salary. Uh, and so this is alluded to in the complaint that this happened to someone lately, but they don't name who. And then sort of Viva says, oh, actually, we're harmed by it. So it'll be interesting to see if the judge is going to jump on that and take that bait, because otherwise they'll just kind of punt this down the line. I give Viva a pretty good shot with this one in terms
interesting.
of they have a long history of going after non-competes and a lot of success going after non-competes to help their employees. and Wisconsin's a good jurisdiction to go after it. And the interesting facet of this is that Epic, via the Supreme Court case Epic v. Lewis, struck down a lot of the apparatus, the employee rights to go and do class actions. They can force you to go to arbitration. So I think that actually would happen potentially with these non-competes if an employee brought it forward.
Mm,
Veeva's bringing it forward, so not subject to that.
hmm.
And if they knock out part of it, they knock out all of it. So that's an interesting facet to how Wisconsin law is, that you can't just blue line it, I think it's called, something like that. You can't just slightly edit the non-compete. You have to, it's knocked out completely. And so it could be very good for Epic employees down the line as a result.
Epic was a great first job, and a lot of people are happy working there. It's a cool place to work, and they do cool stuff. I bet Viva's winning a lot of favor from Epic employees by going to bat against the non-compete.
As a takeaway, and that's the thing we'll end on. Generally speaking, it in a pro-competitive sense, it is good to allow talent to move from company to companies that
Yeah,
can offer superior companies that offer better benefits. And so, for a variety of reasons, I think that I am extremely pro, no non-competes,
yeah.
because it allows talent to get what they're worth. It allows companies that are successful can offer better benefits to get the best talent. And so it's why very interesting that you see very, very liberal types of people, but also Texas in their lawsuit against
Uh-huh.
Epic attacking the non-compete for very different reasons, in a very pro employee, pro labor perspective, and also a very pro employer perspective.
Yeah. Well, you're a big fan of exchange, whether it's employee exchange or information exchange. Thanks for joining the official podcast today. I've got to run, but appreciate your time, Brendan.
See y'all.
Yeah.